That is not a deer. Ronan's breath hitched as he stared at the figure tangled in his trap. He had expected to find a rabbit, maybe a fox, but this? His fingers gripped the handle of his knife, but he didn't move. The creature flinched. A pair of glowing, violet eyes locked onto his, wild with fear. She trembled, pulling against the snare, her skin shimmering faintly under the rising sun. Don't come closer, a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't spoken. It wasn't heard. It just appeared. Ronan's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. His survival instinct screamed at him to run, to fight, to do something. But he just stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at the impossible. She was humanoid, but not human. Her limbs were too slender, her fingers too long, and her skin, pale blue, like moonlight on water. Her hair, silver and weightless, floated as if caught in a gentle current. "What the hell are you?" His voice came out hoarse. She flinched again, her whole body shaking. "You're going to eat me, aren't you?" "What?" His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" The alien girl pressed herself against the ground, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "I know what you do to creatures you catch. I've seen it." Ronan followed her gaze. The bones near his campfire, the skinned rabbit hanging from a branch, the blood-stained knife on his belt. His stomach dropped. Oh, she thought he was going to butcher her. "I'm not," he sighed, rubbing his face. "Look, I don't even know what you are, but I'm not eating you." Silence. The girl studied him carefully, then glanced at the snare still wrapped around her ankle. Her breathing was uneven, her expression torn between fear and disbelief. Then, "What will you do to me?" Ronan exhaled sharply. "First, get you out of that trap. Then, we'll figure it out." He crouched down slowly, moving like he was trying not to startle a spooked deer. The girl tensed but didn't pull away. The rope had tightened badly around her ankle, and her skin was raw where she had struggled. He hesitated. This might hurt a bit. She swallowed hard, nodding. Carefully, Ronan loosened the snare, his fingers brushing against her strange, soft skin. The moment she was free, she scrambled backward, putting distance between them. But she didn't run. She just sat there, watching him, those glowing eyes still filled with wary confusion. And for the first time, Ronan wondered, what now? Ronan didn't move. The girl didn't either. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions and unsteady breaths. The forest around them was waking up, birds chirping, the wind shifting through the trees. But everything between them was unnaturally still. The alien girl flexed her freed ankle, wincing slightly, then looked at him again. "You really aren't going to hurt me?" Ronan exhaled, shaking his head.
"No."
Her fingers curled into the dirt, gripping the earth as if she were bracing for something. "Then, what do you want?" Ronan hesitated. What did he want? She was an alien, a literal alien, sitting in his clearing, looking at him like he held her fate in his hands. His mind scrambled for logic, but nothing about this was logical. I need to know what you are, why you're here, where you came from," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "No one else has ever seen something like you before." She flinched at that. "Then I shouldn't be here." Ronan didn't know how to respond to that. His gut told him she didn't belong here, not just in this forest, but on this planet. And yet, here she was. The girl eyed him warily, then slowly pushed herself up, balancing on her injured ankle. She wobbled but didn't fall. Ronan caught himself before he instinctively reached out to help her. She wouldn't take it well. Her gaze darted toward the dense trees beyond the clearing, like she was considering running. "You won't get far," Ronan said, folding his arms. Her eyes snapped back to him. "Why?" He nodded toward her ankle. "You're hurt, and this forest isn't kind to those who don't know it." She hesitated, shifting her weight slightly. "I don't trust you," she said finally. "Fair enough," Ronan muttered. "I don't trust you either." Another silence. Then, something shifted in her expression. "Where do you live?" she asked. Ronan narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "If I must stay," she said, "I need to know if I will survive." He didn't know why, but something about the way she said it made his stomach twist. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being practical, calculating, like she'd been in dangerous situations before. Ronan jerked his thumb toward a path behind him. Cabin's up that way. She glanced at the path, then at him. If you wanted to kill me, she said slowly, you would have already done it. Ronan raised an eyebrow. That thought just occurred to you?
Yes.
She inhaled, like she was forcing herself to a decision. Then I will go with you. Ronan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. All right, he said, turning toward the path. Try to keep up. She followed, but not too closely. The walk was quiet. Every so often, he'd glance over his shoulder, half expecting her to vanish, but she was still there, limping slightly, her silver hair catching the sunlight. Her glowing eyes flicked from tree to tree, watching everything like she was memorizing it. Finally, the cabin came into view. It wasn't much, a simple wooden structure nestled between thick trees, smoke still curling from the chimney. The girl slowed, staring at it like it was something foreign. This is where you live? She asked. Ronan shrugged.
It's home.
She tilted her head, considering that. It is small. He snorted. Compared to what? She didn't answer. Ronan walked up the steps and pushed open the door. You coming in? Or are you going to stand there all day? The girl hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped inside. Ronan watched as she took in the room, the wooden walls, the stone fireplace, the scattered hunting gear. She moved carefully, like she was trying not to disturb anything. Finally, she turned to him. What do you eat? She asked. Ronan blinked. What? She crossed her arms. If I am to stay here, I need to know if our food is compatible. Ronan stared at her for a second, then shook his head with a chuckle. First, you think I'm going to eat you. Now, you're worried about dinner. She didn't smile. It is important. Ronan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Fine. I have bread, dried meat, some vegetables. She considered this. I will try the bread. Ronan dug into his stash, pulling out a small loaf. He tore off a piece and held it out. The girl eyed it suspiciously before taking it. She sniffed it first, then took a tiny bite. Her expression remained unreadable as she chewed. Finally, she swallowed. It is acceptable. Ronan let out a breathy laugh. Glad you approve. She sat down cross-legged on the floor, taking another bite. For the first time, she seemed calmer. Ronan leaned against the table, watching her. So, he said after a while, got a name? She hesitated, then nodded.
Nix.
Ronan took that in. Nix, he repeated. All right. She glanced up at him. And you? Ronan. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, like she was committing it to memory. A small, strange silence settled between them. Not as tense as before, but still cautious. Finally, Nick spoke. I will stay, she said, until I find a way home. Ronan met her gaze. Something in him told him this wouldn't be simple. Yeah, he muttered. Guess you will. And just like that, the hunter and the alien girl began a life they never expected. Ronan wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere between awkward silences and uneasy trust, Nyx became a part of his daily life. She was unlike anything he had ever known. Even after days of watching her, he still found himself staring, trying to piece together what she was. Her skin seemed to shift under the light, like it was absorbing something he couldn't see. Her hair never tangled, never seemed to need brushing. And her eyes, they glowed in the dark, like twin embers burning in the night. She asked questions constantly about the food, the fire, the stars above them, and Ronan found himself answering, despite himself. But it was clear Nyx had secrets. She never spoke of where she had come from, never spoke of how she ended up on Earth. When he asked, she would look away, her fingers tightening around whatever she was holding. I don't want to talk about it, she would say. So he let it go. For a while. One night, after nearly a week of uneasy cohabitation, Ronan found her outside, standing beneath the open sky. The firelight cast flickering shadows on her skin, making her look even less human than she already did. You always come out here at night, Ronan said, leaning against the doorway. Why? Nyx didn't turn. Her silver hair moved with the wind, floating as if weightless. The stars, she murmured. Ronan glanced up. The sky was clear tonight, filled with millions of glittering dots, the same stars he had always known. But to her, "You looking for home?" he asked. A long silence stretched between them. Then, barely above a whisper,
Yes.
Ronan exhaled. He had figured as much. "Do you know how to get back?" Nyx closed her eyes.
No.
Ronan watched her, something in his chest tightening. "You're stuck here." It wasn't a question. She nodded. And for the first time since he found her, Nyx looked small. He didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't good at comforting people. Never had been. But for some reason, seeing her like this strange, otherworldly being who had always held herself so distant, made something stir inside him. Before he could stop himself, he reached out. His fingers barely brushed her shoulder before she tensed. He froze. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her head, her glowing violet eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was no fear in them. Just something softer. Something Ronan didn't have a name for. Days turned into weeks. The forest changed as the air grew colder, leaves burning into reds and oranges before falling away. Nyx adapted to life in the cabin with surprising ease. She learned to help with small things, fetching firewood, preparing food, cleaning. She never complained, never questioned. And in return, Ronan taught her. He showed her how to start a fire, how to track animals in the woods, how to listen for danger. And though she never said it, he could tell she was grateful. She was strong, faster than him, even with her injury. Sometimes, he would catch her moving in ways no human ever could, climbing trees without effort, dodging branches before they could touch her. She never explained it. He never asked. But there were other times. Times when he caught her staring at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Times when she sat a little closer to him by the fire. And times when the silence between them wasn't so uncomfortable anymore. One night, as the fire crackled between them, Nyx spoke. "If I could leave," she said, voice quiet, "would you want me to?" Ronan didn't answer right away. He should have said yes. He should have told her that this wasn't her place, that she had a home out there, somewhere. But instead, he found himself saying, "I don't know." Nyx looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. Then, after a moment, she simply nodded, as if she understood. The first sign of trouble came 2 nights later. Ronan woke to the sound of something wrong. A low, pulsing hum. He bolted upright, reaching for the knife under his pillow. Then he saw it. A shadow moving outside the window. Not human. Not an animal. Something else. He barely had time to react before the door burst open. A figure stood in the doorway. Tall. Unnaturally thin. Skin as black as the void, reflecting no light. Its eyes burned white-hot, locked onto Nyx. Ronan barely had time to move before she was on her feet, body tense. "No," she whispered. The figure stepped forward. It didn't speak, but something in the air shifted, and Ronan felt it. Like pressure inside his skull, like something was reaching for him. Nyx's breath hitched. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to go back." Ronan didn't think, didn't question. He moved. Before he even registered what he was doing, he grabbed his rifle from beside the bed and fired. The bullet never reached the thing. It stopped midair, and then vanished. Ronan's blood ran cold. The figure turned toward him. Its white-hot eyes burned. He felt something inside his skull twist, pain blooming behind his eyes. Then Nyx screamed, not in fear, in anger. The entire room shook. A blast of energy erupted from her, sending the figure flying back through the doorway. The walls trembled, the fire flickering wildly. Ronan barely managed to stay on his feet. The figure landed outside, unmoving. Nyx stood there, chest rising and falling, her hands glowing with an eerie, pulsing light. And for the first time, Ronan saw her for what she really was. Not just an alien. Something powerful. Something dangerous. She turned to him, eyes wide. "I have to go," she said. Ronan felt his chest tighten. "What?" "They found me." She took a step toward him, voice desperate. "If I stay, they'll come again. And they won't stop until they take me." Ronan's grip on the rifle tightened. "Then we fight." Nyx shook her head. "You don't understand." They can't be fought. Silence. Ronan swallowed hard. Then what do we do? Nyx hesitated. Then, finally, you let me go. Ronan felt something inside him twist. He didn't want her to go, but he knew she had no choice. And neither did he. The next night, under a sky filled with stars, Ronan walked with her to the clearing. She turned to him one last time. I wish, she started, then stopped. She didn't need to finish. He understood. So did he. Then, in a flash of light, she was gone, and Ronan was left staring at the empty sky, wondering if he'd ever see her again.